Hello, this is Dr. Stanley Lang. Welcome to this presentation, and the topic is overcoming fear of death. So the reason I wanted to tell this story, talk about this subject and tell a story, is because of an encounter that I had this month with a patient who I've actually been seeing for many years. Like many of my patients who are dealing with chronic disease, they're often dealing with a lot of other feelings, which includes the feeling of fear of death. But they don't normally talk about it very much. And one of the things that I've discovered is that one of the most common things that brings patients to a doctor's office is this very thing, fear of death. And because what happens is that some sort of an illness, some sort of a symptom, a disease develops, and it brings a person in contact with their mortality. Now, we live most of the time not thinking about the fact that we're all going to die. It's not something that we think about. We don't like to think about, most of us. And most of us are hoping we can kind of put it off for a while. And then something happens. We get a physical symptom that pushes that reality of our mortality right in front of us, and then we can't escape it. And all of a sudden, the denial breaks away. The barrier that I've set up to keep me from seeing this fear, from experiencing this fear, all of a sudden it's there, and I'm feeling it. And so that causes the person then to try to get in and see their doctor quickly. And then there is very often not voiced, I'm afraid I'm dying, but there's a fear that something is going on, but behind it is that there's the fear of death that's driving it. And I've seen this many times over the years. And I was going to simply tell you the story that this patient had, because there's some neat spiritual truths that happened as part of our discussion that he raised with me. But before I do, I want to talk about this, that we have the option between choosing ancient truths or being deceived in this subject. Because when I went online, just for the fun of it, to search on the subject of the concept of fear of death or overcoming fear of death, I was just curious as to what kind of resources would be out there, what kind of resources that people had created. And I was surprised to see that almost all of the stuff that was out there was what I would put under the, quote, New Age category, which is actually Old Age paganism. And I'm not trying to say paganism I'm not trying to imply evil with that. It's just a way of thinking that is not at all congruent with Christianity. In fact, it's diametrically opposed in many cases. A lot of the new versions of paganism, the neo-paganism stuff that's out there, particularly as it relates to this concept of overcoming fear of death, is totally opposite to Christianity. So I wanted to put something out there that at least would offer an alternative way of thinking about this, because I think a lot of people are being deceived. There are ancient truths and there's a lot of deception. So on with my story. So this patient asks me whether people ever talk to me about fear of death. And I said, sure, people talk to me about that, not uncommonly. And then he went on to talk about his own personal recent near-death experience and the out-of-body experience that he had associated with that. He was declared dead. His wife was brought into the room to witness his dead body, and then he woke up, remembering some of the details of his time when he was supposedly dead. And ever since then, he can't get out of his mind the fact that he is going to die, and he's dealing with fear of death. So I talked to him about what he believed in. And did he believe in God? Did he believe in anything? And he says, well, I'm not quite sure. Sometimes I think I believe in God, sometimes not. So I talked to him a little bit about that, and I talked to him about my own journey of coming to experience Jesus Christ as a personal Lord and Savior in my life, and how that freed me from the fear of death. Now, how did that free me from the fear of death? Because it gave me insight into that which we cannot know on the other side of death, which is what's waiting for us. And that's because Jesus has seen it, and he came back and he taught us about it, and he taught us how to prepare for that eventuality. And then later, one of his apostles had an extended vision, which is a book in the Bible that awaits us after death. And so we have a picture that we know what kind of waits for people after death, and everybody isn't going to heaven. That's the bad news for people that believe in this ancient deception versus the ancient truth. The neo-paganism strategies that help to lull you into thinking that all is one and one is all, and other variations on that theme, and that are, when you listen to the way they're talking, it is a way of basically saying nothing is true and everything is true. Nothing is God, everything is God, and a whole lot of variations on that. And the truth is, there is a God, and he has a son, and his name is Jesus Christ, and Jesus Christ is also one with that God, and recognizing that and accepting that reality into your life is the ultimate way to overcome fear of death, and not to just kind of lull yourself into a way of thinking that numbs your mind into believing that you've overcome your fear of death. So I asked this person whether he wanted to experience this experience with Jesus that I had personally experienced, and he said he did. I said, do you want to go home and think about it, or do you want to pray now? And he said, I want to pray now, because he's already been living with this fear of death. He doesn't want it anymore. And I might say that this person looks ill. He looks like the kind of person that you wouldn't be surprised if he died next week, because he looks ill almost all the time because of the different things that he's dealing with. Well, the long and the short of it is that we did pray together. He did, I believe, make a commitment to have Jesus in his life as his Lord, to experience him as a Savior, to be committed to giving all of himself to Jesus, to begin the relationship. So he began the relationship with Jesus, and I told him, you don't need to worry about the details. Jesus is going to come to you and start teaching you. Now, of course, I'm going to give him some additional information, because you don't just plug people into a vacuum of no knowledge. But the point is, Jesus is going to take care of the inner work. And an interesting thing happened. This person is always pasty looking. His skin is always white. He always looks ill. And after that brief prayer, he had normal skin color for the first time that I've ever seen him in years. So he didn't even feel that difference, but I could see the difference in him. Now, I don't know where that's going to take him. We'll continue to meet together because I see him for medical issues. We'll have our opportunities to talk about it. But I do believe that he's going to start to experience a lessening of that fear of death, because he's now experiencing something brand new, something that is ancient truth, which is that God exists. He's a personal God. There is one God, and he loves us so much that he sent Jesus to save us from ourselves and show us the way to be with him forever. Now, that's the truth as has been taught through Christianity for more than 2,000 years, a truth I've personally experienced. I believe it is the true answer to how you overcome fear of death. Now, does that mean that all Christians do not have fear of death? No, that's not at all, because most Christians haven't dug deep enough in to really experience the love of God yet. But they're on the path at least, and at some point, hopefully each one of them will experience this inner peace that is overcoming the fear of death. Now, in other videos, I've talked about the concept of how to be happy. Well, ultimately, it's really hard to be happy when you're having fear going on. Now, as I said, most of the time, we suppress our fear of death. We have a tight lid on it. We don't think about it. We spend so much mental energy not looking at it that that mental energy is wasted. That could be put to other places. And when it sneaks out here and there, and we have anxieties about what's going on, it's hard to be happy. But when you have suppressed completely the fear of death because of the experience of the love of God, a personal God, a God who knows you personally and loves you so much that he sent his own son to take all of your suffering on himself, because you know that in your heart, now you can really be happy. Now, there's still a lot of other things that stand in the way of happiness, like are we taking care of ourselves physically and emotionally? But the point is, happiness is tied to this truth. This is ultimate spiritual health. So when we want to be spiritually healthy to the max, I believe there's only one path, and that is to experience ongoing relationship with Jesus Christ. Does that invalidate everybody else's spiritual experiences? That's not what I'm saying at all. But I consider those other experiences that people have as preliminary, and if they're valid at all, they're pointing towards this deeper and deepest experience of all, which is experiencing Jesus Christ. And may that happen in your life in a way that gives you peace, heals your fears, and gives you happiness. I wish you well. God bless, and have a great day.